Jennifer's parents, they're coming back from Little Rock, where he's been getting cancer treatment. They just pulled in right as they got back from church, and they're both sick. Brad kind of stayed home with them so Jennifer could come teach class, but she's kind of slipped out right after class to go be with them. I think I saw or heard Macy and them maybe sick, or someone in their family. You may saw that Misty posted on our Mustang Friends Only site that Macy and Savannah's Uncle Brad Long has done very well. So I want to remember Macy and Savannah and this time. Out of town, and as Larry mentioned last week, Eldon's unable to vote. That's why you're not here. Or anybody, I probably overlooked somebody. Larry, invitation song, chorus 3, have your. Since Derek was gone, one of the Sim will have one of the Sims will have Derek's out, so I'm not sure who that is. But tonight, before we offer the talk to you tonight about inconsistent love, and if you want to turn just one verse that I want to read in the Old Testament, Hosea chapter 6 and verse 4. Seems like it's always easy to pick on the Israelites a lot of time when we talk about being inconsistent and their obedience, but it says in Hosea chapter 6 and verse 4, it says, "What shall I do with you, O Ephraim? What shall I do with you, O Judah? Your love is like a morning cloud, like the dew that goes away early." The Israelites are kind of infamous for their inconsistent obedience and love for God, and we see that the prophet Hosea here is kind of reprimanding them for that fact. It's easy to look, I think, at their situation a lot of times and say, why couldn't they just be consistent? Why couldn't they just follow God, never complain? Why was it this kind of constant back and forth? They're described here as a morning cloud, something that promises, rain possibly or shade, but it quickly evaporates. The morning sun or the morning dew that looks like it's going to bring moisture to the earth, but again, it returns to the atmosphere when the sun comes up. It helped them so many times, anything would have been possible with God on their side, but whenever I'm critical of them, or maybe whenever we're critical of the Israelites, we have to realize that we have the same God, Christians do today, and that we can be just as inconsistent as Christians as the Israelites were with our love towards God. And it's easy to kind of judge them from bird's eye view, even if we've been guilty of doing that same thing. So tonight, for just a moment, I want to reflect on that question. How consistent is your love for God? Maybe your love for God is very consistent. That's good. Maybe it's just at this point in your life, your love is very consistent with God. But if it's not, then hopefully some of these questions that we ask and some things we can look at might be able to help us to reflect and to grow spiritually. As we were in Colorado this last week or so, in the mountains, there's a lot of different streams and creeks. There's also a lot of rivers at the base of the mountain because there's snow there and you're at the highest point. And I was thinking about how a lot of those creeks and those streams, they'll receive a lot of water a short amount of time, but when the snow's done or when it's done raining, there's this high point, then they just kind of quickly dry up. And some of the rivers were down and some of the lakes there, but I was thinking about how some of those rivers, they are always consistent. They're always flowing, they're strong, and they're powerful. I couldn't help but think about when I was working on this lesson how sometimes our love for God can be inconsistent like that. Is it like that deep river that flows faithfully and flows every day, or is it like that shallow creek that may flow for a while, but as soon as the rain's gone, it dries up? It's gone. Do you find maybe your love comes and goes in spurts? Or is it sometimes really powerful? It's full of emotion like that river or that powerful stream, and then other times it's weak and lifeless. And so I want to look just kind of quickly at the parable of the sower. We won't read the whole thing tonight, but just kind of highlight a few of the passages, because Jesus predicted that there would be people who would love inconsistently, and we don't want to be guilty of that. We want to be on guard against that. And that story comes, or that parable comes in Luke chapter 8, kind of starting around verse 4, but he starts off by, saying sometimes our hearts are just hard and we don't want to listen to God. In verse 5, it talks about the seed that was sowed and fell along the path and was trampled underfoot, and the birds of the air devoured it. And kind of the explanation there is that the ones along that path are the ones who have heard, and then when the devil comes and takes away the word from their heart, so they may not believe and be saved. Or sometimes our faith is shallow, kind of like that shallow creek, and we fall away when times get hard during times of testing. Verse 6, it says that some fell on the rock, and as it grew up, it withered away because it had no moisture. And then in verse 13, it says that the ones on the rock are the ones who they hear the word, they receive it with joy, but they have no root. They believe for a while, and in times of testing, they fall away when things get hard. And then sometimes we're just distracted by cares and pleasures of the world. It's easy to do today with so many things we can get involved in. There's so many hobbies. Believe me, I've got a lot of hobbies that there's so many things we can get caught up in, those cares and pleasures that can distract us from our love for God and from our faithfulness. In verse 7, he says, and some fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up with it and choked it. And then in verse 14, he explains that as for those that fell among the thorns, they are those who hear, but as they go on their way, they're choked by the cares and the riches and pleasures of life, and the fruit does not mature. And so, whatever the reason may be, we're not producing the fruit that we should be during these times. So, if you are asking the question tonight, why am I not loving God consistently right now? Well, there could be, a lot of reasons. Some of those maybe we talked about in the parable of the sower, but only you can really honestly answer that. Again, we have to examine our own hearts and look at those things, look deep into our hearts, and ask ourselves, maybe has our love for God grown cold? Is there an idol in the way? Is there something we're cherishing more than God? Are we resisting God? Is it pride that's in our way? Is your faithfulness inconsistent? Have you been deepening your faith through that daily disciplines of prayer and studying the Bible? So if there is something that's making your love for God inconsistent, why not try to identify what that obstacle is, seek to remove it from your life, strive for consistency every day. Passages that are like in James 4 and 8 talks about if we draw near to God, he will draw near to you. So identify those things. It's making our love inconsistent. Eliminate them. Draw near to God. We know that he will draw near to us. So if your love has grown inconsistent, the good news is if you're still here tonight and breathing, then there's still an opportunity to change that. You can, again, try to seek to identify those things and draw closer to God. If you're not a Christian, then there's not a better time or a place than right now and right here to become one if you know what you need to do to be saved. If you're not sure, study with you further and try to answer those questions. But whatever your desire may be, come now as we stand and sing.
Take Father in heaven, we thank you for bringing us together this evening to study your word. We ask that you be with all the ones who are apart from us tonight, whether it be to illness in them or their family or traveling. Be with them and heal them if it be your will. Help us to remember that all things happen according to your plan, not ours, even though we may not understand why. Help us to remember that no matter what the outcome, to continue to love like a river, not like a stream and dry up, but to keep the love flowing, just like you do for us. We ask that you be with us as we leave here this evening and go back out into the world. Help us to be lights and to shine and be examples for others, and that our examples will help bring others to you. Thank you for your Son who died on the cross for our sins. In Jesus' name we pray.